Good morning. It's Pastor Martin, coming to you from the beauty of my backyard. I'd like to continue reading from the book Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History by Vashti Harrison. And today we're going to read about Josephine Baker, who was born in 1906 and died in 1975. Josephine had an early start in the entertainment business. As a child in St. Louis, Missouri, she would put on song and dance shows with the neighborhood kids. By the time she was 14, she was working as a stagehand at local theaters. The first time she performed on stage, she made waves with her wild dancing and silliness. She stood out from the chorus line, and the other performers sourly called her a scene stealer. But that was just Josephine's style. Josephine's career really took off when she went to Europe. France became her adoptive country, and Paris her stage. When she returned to the United States, American audiences were not very receptive to her. A black woman who seemed too uppity for her own skin. Josephine, meanwhile, was shocked by the prejudice and discrimination she encountered. From then on, she negotiated non-discrimination clauses in her contracts for her performances and fought for integrated audiences. Her fearlessness did not end there. During World War II, Josephine worked for the French resistance, smuggling secret messages in her sheet music and undergarments. After the war, she was awarded two of France's highest military honors. Josephine built a large, loving family with adopted kids from all over the world. She called them the Rainbow Tribe. In 1963, she traveled back to the United States to march with Dr. Martin Luther King at the famous March on Washington. She was the only woman slated to speak that day. Josephine was never one to fall in line. She always stood out and made her own way. She was a brave woman who was so much more than just a performer. And for the second story today, a story about Mahalia Jackson. She was born in 1911 and died in 1972. Born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, Mahalia was always surrounded by the sounds of the blues and Mardi Gras. As a child, she sang jazz songs by Bessie Smith in her room at night. But little Haley, as she was called, came from a religious family, and the only music that was acceptable to them was gospel music. She made her singing debut in the choir at the Mount Moriah Baptist Church and blew everyone away with her enormous voice. Later in life, she felt the urge to sing non-religious music, but she had made a promise to herself and her family to only sing gospel, and she stuck to it her whole life. She turned down big nightclub shows and lived on very little money. But in 1946, she recorded a single, Move On Up a Little Higher, that sold over 2 million copies. She gained a following around the United States and traveled for performances. Her shows drew large crowds from both the black and white communities. Segregation, however, was still the law of the land, and Mahalia struggled with it during and after her performances. When she was on the road, Mahalia kept food in her car, just so she wouldn't be relegated to the colored section of a restaurant. At the request of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mahalia participated in the Montgomery bus boycott in 1963. She performed at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where Reverend King gave his famous speech, I Have a Dream. She was on the podium behind him, and when he started to go off script, she encouraged him. Tell him, Martin, she shouted, tell him about the dream. The most famous part of his speech wasn't planned, but Mahalia knew how powerful his words were and how important it would be to share them. What inspiring ladies we're learning about these days. Hope you have a great day.